Welcome back. Part 3 of Saguina Grove by Barbara Elaine Sanders, published as a limited edition in 1981. I'd like to give a little personal note on this third installment because I'm going to read to you the text of the Saginaw Treaty of 1819. Back in 1969, I was 14 years old, and there was a newspaper published in Bridgeport, Michigan, called the Bridgeport Future. It was published by the Jaycees and some other interested parties, and I had at that point been collecting relics of Bridgeport history for over a year and had established an awesome and amazing collection of historical items that I sought to be housed in a township museum. But at any rate, for the anniversary edition of the Bridgeport Future, I was approached by the editor and assistant editor and some of the other people that worked on the paper. I was taken out to dinner or lunch, and they wanted me to write a history of Bridgeport Township, which would comprise pretty much the entire first anniversary issue of their paper. And at 14, I was really kind of shocked and impressed that they wanted me to do this, and I did, and it led to me doing weekly articles for them for the next couple of years until I had moved to Oscoda with my mom and dad. One of the articles that I wrote, though, was presenting the Treaty of Saginaw the Treaty of 1819, and it is, as far as I can remember, the only article that they refused to publish because it was very lengthy, and actually they felt very boring, and they didn't think readership would be particularly interested in the reading the official treaty. So having said that, what I'm going to present here in just a moment, as published in the book, is the Saginaw Treaty of 1819, but we'll begin with a little preamble, which begins, "In the middle of the afternoon of September 24th, 1819, the treaty was concluded, and a copy of it was presented to the Chippewas. Throughout the subsequent years, the copy was passed on to their descendants until eventually came into the possession of Estella Squanada, who was related to Chief Nakchicom, and who was wife of Reverend John Silas, a Chippewa Methodist minister in Iosco County. In 1934, a photocopy of the copy of the treaty, which was given to the Chippewas in 1819, was made, and in time was donated to the Hoyt Library in Saginaw. Unfortunately, the original copy was stolen in 1948 as it was being shown to a group of people, and the Silas family was never able to recover that valuable document. Just by the way, a side note that's not in the book, Reverend John Silas actually was the pastor at the Mankato Indian Reservation Church, Mission Church there on Kings Corner Road, County Line Road as it's also called, a really nice little rustic church back there, and anyways, he pastored that for a time. Back to the book. The text of the treaty was relatively short and contained the following 9 articles in conclusion. The Saginaw Treaty of 1819, Article 1. The Chippewa Nation of Indians, in consideration of the stipulations herein made on the part of the United States, do hereby forever secede to the United States the land comprehended within the following lines and boundaries, beginning at a point in the present Indian boundary line, which runs due north from the mouth of the Great Agalaes River, 6 miles south of the place where the basin line, or so-called, intersects the same, thence west 60 miles, thence in a direct line to the head of the Thunder Bay River, thence down to the same following the course thereof to the mouth, thence northeast to the boundary line between the United States and the British province of Upper Canada, thence with the same line to the line established by the Treaty of Detroit in the year 1807, thence with the said line to the place of beginning. Article 2. From the cessation of foresaid, the following tracts of land shall be reserved for the use of the Chippewa Nation of Indians. One tract of 8,000 acres on the east side of the river Osable, near where the Indians now live. One tract of 2,000 acres on the river Misagowisk. One tract of 6,000 acres on the north side of the river Calling at the Indian village. One tract of 5,760 acres upon the Flint River to include Realms Village and a place called Kishkaw Bawi. One tract of 8,000 acres on the head of the river Huron, which empties into the Saginaw River at the village of Atusan. One island in the Saginaw Bay, one tract of 2,000 acres where Nabobask formerly lived, one tract of 1,000 acres near the island in the Saginaw River, one tract of 2,000 acres at the mouth of Point Au Gres River, one tract of 1,000 acres on the river Huron at Meniquate's Village, one tract of 10,000 acres on the Shiawassee River at a place called Big Rock, one tract of 3,000 acres on the Shiawassee River at Kachiwa 1 Dug Inek, one tract of 6,000 acres at the Little Forks on the Tittabawassink River, one tract of 6,000 acres at the Blackbird's Town on the Tittabawassink River, and one tract of 40,000 acres on the Saginaw River to be hereafter located. Article 3. There shall be reserved for the use of each of the persons hereunder mentioned and their heirs, which persons are all Indians by descent, the following tracts of land. For the use of John Riley, son of Mina Wakumi Gokwa, a Chippewa woman, 640 acres of land beginning at the head of the first marsh above the mouth of the Saginaw River on the east side thereof. For the use of Peter Riley, son of Mani Wokum Gokwa, a Chippewa woman, 640 acres of land beginning above the adjoining the apple trees on the west side of the Saginaw River and running up the same quantity. For the use of James Riley, 640 acres beginning on the east side of the Saginaw River nearly opposite to Kempo's trading house and running up the river for quantity. For the use of Kaw Isako, or the Crow, a Chippewa chief, 640 acres of land on the east side of the Saginaw River at a place called Minitigo, and to include in the said 640 acres the island opposite to said place. For the use of Nowokishik, Metawani, Makachinokwa, Nondi Shimo, Peta Benakwa, Mesawakwet, Checkbok, each 640 acres of land to be located and near the Grand Traverse of the Flint River in such manner as the President of the United States may direct, and for the use of the children of Boko Tondin, 640 acres on the Calling River. Article 4. In consideration of the cessation of foresaid, the United States agrees to pay the Chippewa Nation of Indians annually and forever the sum of $1,000 in silver, and do by hereby agree to all annuities due by any former treaty to the said tribe shall be hereafter paid in silver. Article 5. The stipulation contained in the Treaty of Greenville relative to the right of the Indians to hunt on the seceded land, while it continues the property of the United States, shall apply to this treaty, and the Indians shall for the same term enjoy the privilege of making sugar upon the same land, committing no unnecessary waste upon the trees. Article 6. The United States agrees to pay the Indians the value of any improvements which they may be obliged to abandon in consequence of the lines established by this treaty, and which improvements add real value to the land. Article 7. The United States reserve to the proper authority the right to make roads through any part of the land reserved by this treaty. Article 8. The United States engaged to provide and support a blacksmith for the Indians at Saginaw so long as the President of the United States may think proper, and to furnish the Chippewa Indians with such farming utensils and cattle, and to employ such persons to aid them in their agriculture as the President may deem expedient. In Article 9, this treaty shall take effect and be obligatory on the contracting parties so soon as the same shall be ratified by the President of the United States by and with the advice and consent of the Senate thereof. In testimony whereof the said Lewis Cass, Commissioner of aforesaid, and the chiefs and warriors of the Chippewa Nation of Indians have hereto set their hands at Saginaw in the territory of Michigan in this 24th day of September in the year of our Lord 1819, signed Lewis Cass. On March 2nd, 1820, the treaty was ratified by the United States Senate, and in keeping with Article 9, the agreement thus took effect. It is interesting to note that records indicate that a copy of the treaty which the Senate ratified was sent to the Secretary of War by Governor Cass on September 10th, 1819, that day in which Cass first arrived at Saguina, and the day prior to the opening of negotiations. Thoughts concerning a possible erroneous date on the communique, the political maneuvering involved in the preparation and agreement of the document, and whether the whole affair was entirely honorable and copacetic must ultimately be left to speculation. However, a supplemental article to the treaty which the Chippewas required to be included was virtually ignored by the Senate and was rejected as part of the official accepted document. The text of this supplemental article reads as follows. The Chippewa Indians, being desirous to reward Dr. William Brown of Detroit for the professional services which he has rendered to them for 20 years past, request that 3 sections of land be granted to him and his heirs in the tract of county hereby ceded. The same request was urged at the Treaty of Detroit in the year 1807, at the treaty concluded at the foot of the rapids of the Miami in the year 1817, and at the Treaty of St. Mary's in the year 1818, and is now renewed by them in the confident hope that the land therein granted will be confirmed to him. The Chippewa Indians do also grant Henry Connor to James Connor, who were taken prisoners by them in early life and lived with them many years, and to their heirs 1,280 acres of land. The said Indians do also grant to Peter W. Knaggs, George Knaggs, and Jacques Godefroy, who have been adopted by them and their heirs, 640 acres of land each. The said Indians further requested that 12 sections of land be sold in the same manner and upon the same terms as the lands of the United States are sold, and the proceeds appropriated under the direction of the President of the United States for the purpose of making roads to and through their reservation. The said Indians also requested the sum of $1,298.20 be paid to Conrad T. Ike as compensation for property taken by them at Saginaw in the year 1812. The Commissioner of the United States has admitted these grants and requests into the article, but not being authorized to accede to them on the part of the United States, he reserves the same to the President of the United States and to the Senate thereof for their decision. But it is hereby expressly understood and declared that the ratification or rejection of this article or any part thereof is not to affect any article in this treaty. Signed, Lewis Cass, attested by John L. Leib, Secretary. In retrospect, as I read that to you, I do realize that that would have been a lengthy and maybe somewhat tedious article for a weekly newspaper, but I think that it's interesting to look at the 9 articles in the supplemental article to see what was promised to the Indians and what was actually given to them, and I wonder if that silver is still being paid to them, which was supposed to be paid in perpetuity. At any rate, the book continues. With the supplementary article, the Chippewas wished to make amends for previous deprivations directed upon certain individuals, and at the same time wished to reward those who had bestowed upon them valuable services and acts of kindness. When the Senate failed to recognize this expression of human compassion, there could be little doubt on whose part honor was lacking in this matter. According to Article 1 of the ratified treaty, the United States acquired forever ownership of Chippewa lands, which were located within a southwesterly angle from the shore of Lake Huron in the vicinity of Alpena to the boundary line of land ceded in the 1807 treaty, for the sum of $1,000 payable in silver annually and forever. Another enormous cession of land carved out the Chippewa territory was gained by the white man. In Article 3, land reserved for individuals who were Indian by descent and their heirs was guaranteed. Naomi's request was granted for lands to be set aside for 11 children. Kawkaliskow, the Crow, was the recipient of a tract of land known later as Crow Island, and the children of Bakatondin were granted 640 acres along the Kawkalan River in Bay County. The three sons of the Chippewa woman Mena, Wukum, Gokwa each were provided 640 acres. In Article 3, the location of their land was specifically indicated. John's land was located in the future main business section of Detroit, or of Bay City. Peter's grant became incorporated into Carlton Township, and the property allotted to James was found on the east side of the Saguina River across from Louis Campeau's trading house, which was the setting of the proceedings for the 1819 treaty negotiations and signing. Governor Cass had accomplished his mission. The treaty had been signed, but as yet all matters had not been settled. The governor still carried in his pocket the $1,666.66 in silver which he had brought from Detroit as incentive for the Chippewas to bargain with him. It was necessary to dispense with the matter and prepare to take leave of Saguina. The governor and the Indians remained congregated about the platform where the treaty was concluded. Also present were some traders, interpreters, official witnesses, and Louis Campeau, their host. At this moment, Jacob Smith, Wa Beesons, was on the platform with Louis Cass. Kishkako, the incorrigible thorn under any saddle, was there with his brother, and the silver had been counted out in half-dollars and placed on the table in front of the governor, ready for conveyance as a symbol of realized indebtedness. By now, the participants at this historical meeting had been assembled for some 2 weeks, and during the course of this period some trading had been carried on. Louis Campeau in his on-site trading house also had transacted business with the Indians, to whom he had extended a purchase on credit arrangement. Somewhere along the way, the chiefs agreed that $1,500 of their obligations to Campeau would be paid from the silver which Cass was about to deliver to the Indians. However, Jacob Smith, who acted on behalf of the Indians throughout the proceedings, strongly objected. If Campeau were to get almost all the sum of money which Cass had brought, not only would the Indians be left with only $166, but the other traders would not have the opportunity to reap financial benefits from the occasion. Smith insisted that Kishkako voice his opposition to Campeau's repayment, and after doing so, Cass indicated that the silver would be given to the Indians unless they should signify otherwise. Louis Campeau was summarily outraged. The governor, so to speak, deceitfully outmaneuvered him. With adrenaline spurting forth and streaming furiously through his body, the young Campeau leaped onto the platform, lunged at Jacob Smith, and delivered 2 fast blows to his face. Louis Buffet, Henry Connor, and Barney Campeau, who served as witness or interpreters for the treaty, immediately interceded and broke up the fight. Thereafter the crowd dispersed. Late that night, the governor, who was so set against alcohol and who fervently crusaded against its consumption, had the United States quartermaster open 5 barrels of whiskey for the Indians. The feisty Campeau, who had lost his money and had not even been able to derive any satisfaction from the fight, decided to go them one better. He ordered 10 barrels of his whiskey to be made available and stationed by them 2 men with dippers to assist the celebrants in getting their drink. By 10 o'clock, things were out of control among the merrymakers, and the Indians were intoxicated to the point of irrational behavior. When Cass surveyed the spectacle from his place of lodging, he was beside himself and sent Major Robert Forsyth with a verbal message to Campeau's quarters. Cass demanded that Campeau put a stop to the flow of liquor, but Campeau refused to comply. Soon after, a guard of troops was placed around Campeau's establishment. When some Indians attempted to enter the store, a scuffle ensued, and one of the Indians was wounded in the leg by one of the soldiers' bayonets. A war whoop was heard, and within a few minutes the entire post was surrounded by Indians brandishing tomahawks angrily raised in the air. The company of infantry stationed on the premises was rendered helpless. Because of the enormous number of Indians, the company of 50 or 60 soldiers was inept to put down the spontaneous uprising, even though the Indians were uproariously drunk. In a state of near panic, Governor Cass went to the door of his lodging and, in beseeching but commanding tone, exclaimed, "Lewis, Lewis, stop the liquor. We shall be all killed. I say stop the liquor." Sweet revenge now belonged to Campeau. It was quite satisfying to see the governor rendered powerless in these circumstances. Lewis then replied to Cass, "General, you commenced it. You let Smith plunder me and rob me, but I will stand between you and all harm." The situation was precarious indeed. Anything could happen, including the extermination of all white men. Very little sleep was had by most people that night. Some of the soldiers were ordered to empty on the ground the whiskey which was left, and it took time for the festivities to subside. Some whites chose to participate in unprintable activities, while Cass and his party finished preparations to abandon Saguina. Under a canopy of darkness early the next morning, the governor and his associates left. The soldiers were gone by 10 o'clock. Louis Campeau remained at Saguina for almost 7 more years until he permanently removed his business to Grand Rapids, where he became known as the founder of that city. Evidently, discontent among the Indians toward the whites was the principal factor which caused him to move. And so they came to Saginaw and by their deeds created an immorality of human endeavor which provided for the growth of the American nation. As an expression of national policy and philosophy, more of the Northwest Territory was now open for settlement, and with a section of land specifically reserved in the 1819 Treaty for James Riley, a parcel of land destined to be part of the future city was set aside. This was the beginning of Saginaw. This was the beginning of the Grove. And I'm going to stop there again. There will be a part 4, which I hope you'll join me for, and that will pick up with detailing the legacy of Jacobus Way. So till next time, thanks for stopping by and spending some time.